If you want to start rigging a VTuber model, here's a few things you should know first. The first thing you're going to need is a Photoshop file, a .psd, with separated layers. For example, all of the eye layers are separated into different parts so everything can move. I am mainly a Live2D rigger rather than an artist, although I did draw this model myself. So I will not be going over the specific layer separation right now, but you can find plenty of tutorials on that. So you have the Photoshop file of your VTuber model. What you want to do next is import it into Live2D. And the way you do that is simply drag and drop the file in. Do keep in mind that clipping usually does reset when you drop things in, so just make sure to reclip everything. To clip something, simply take the ID of the layer that you want to clip something to, and then go to the layer that you want to clip to it, and put it into the clipping ID. Invert mask basically means the layer will never overlap or intersect. On a side note, blending modes do kind of work in Live2D, but only multiply and additive works. The other blending modes do not work in Live2D. So now that your model is imported and clipped, the next thing you want to do is create deformers. And basically what deformers do is it creates a grid around the layer, and you can move it around and simply deform it. If you want to know how to rig a specific part of the model, I have plenty of tutorials up on very specific parts. So do check out my playlist when you're ready. Another thing you'll want to know about as a beginner is parameters. The parameters are seen in the parameter window. And this is not what it looks like when you first load it up. This model already has some rigging on it, but the parameters are basically the things that are bound to the tracking. This is what you rig on. So you take a deformer, let's say this one, and you can bind it to a parameter with this button. Then you can deform, and that is the form that it will register on that specific point. Now let's say you have rigged the eyeballs on X and Y. But how do you get it to register in the corners? What you want to do is you want to have everything selected, and then you go to the menu. It's the 3 bars up here, the palette menu. And then you want to go to synthesize corners. Alternatively, the keyboard shortcut is Ctrl 4. So you synthesize corners, you select the correct ones, and you just press OK. And that will synthesize for you. Now do keep in mind that usually you still need to adjust a little bit, because synthesize corner isn't perfect, but it's gonna give you a good starting point. Now the last thing I want to teach you about in this short Live2D introduction video is the physics menu. So let's say you have done some physics. For example, the hat. You've made some parameters, you bound the movements to the parameters, but how do you bind it to the head movement? What you want to do is you want to go into modeling and then go into physics settings. You want to add a physics group and then make sure the input is set to the input that you want it on. In this case, it is the X movement, so it is bound to angle X and a little bit on angle Z. By the way, position basically means it jiggles. Angle means it's gonna hold that position. The effectiveness you can think of as percentages. So if you have 2, let's say body X, that's also a position. You cannot put this higher than 100 combined. So if I want to put this to 20, I cannot. But if I turn this down to 80, now I can put this on 20. So it is the total percentages on effectiveness. The next thing is pendulums. The pendulum is what is swinging here when things are moving. So you can mess with the pendulum settings to achieve different kinds of motion, which I am not going over right this moment, but just so you know, you can mess around with that. Then if you go to output setting, you can bind the parameters that you have rigged on by simply pressing add. And then you can choose which one you want. And once you have those over here, you have increased the scale a little, you have set everything up. This now moves. Now, if you have set everything up perfectly and you want to do the same for the Y position, you can just press duplicate. And this will duplicate all of your settings. And I already have a head Y here. And all I did was change the input setting to angle Y instead of angle X. And that is how physics work. And with this knowledge, you are ready to start basic rigging. Rigging tends to look super intimidating, but it's actually pretty easy once you get started. It doesn't take the entire knowledge of the software to get started on a simple model rig. Personally, I just figured the rest out with experience as I started rigging more. So don't be afraid to try it. So I hope this could help someone out there, and I will see you next time. Bye guys!